A blood-stained hand closed around her wrist. "Don't tremble now, Restorer," the Mafia boss said softly. "You already touched the one place no one touches. If you run, I'll still remember your hands." She was Sofia Bellini, 24, a conservator of damaged saints and smoke-burned canvases. A woman who believed almost anything broken could be repaired if you were patient enough. She had never planned to test that belief on a living man. In 2 minutes, Dante Salvatore bled across the marble floor of a Milan museum with her fingers pressed to his throat. In 2 hours, she was locked inside the lake house of the most feared man in northern Italy. The secret she hid was simple enough to fit inside a folded scrap of paper from her dead father's workshop, and it was going to destroy the family that took her, or save the man who stopped breathing when she told him not to speak. The first thing I noticed about Dante Salvatore was not his face, it was the silence around him. The museum had been full 10 seconds earlier, donors laughing too hard, crystal striking crystal, curators pretending not to stare at the men in tailored black who never smiled. Then he stepped into the East Gallery, and the room changed shape. Conversations thinned. A waiter missed his tray and corrected himself so fast I wondered if he had felt the shift in the floorboards too. I was kneeling beside a 16th century Madonna with my gloves off, trying to coax a curled edge of paint flat with a sable brush. Charity events were bad for art and worse for my nerves. People drank Prosecco in front of saints and leaned too close to gold leaf, and I spent the evening hovering like a disappointed ghost. "Signorina Bellini," my supervisor hissed from behind a smile. "Less glaring. More gratitude. These men keep the restoration wing open. These men are breathing on a panel older than their bloodlines," I muttered. He heard me. I knew it because I looked up and found a pair of dark eyes on me from across the room, steady, unreadable, almost bored. He was taller than the men around him, broad-shouldered without showing it off, his midnight suit cut so perfectly it made everyone else look rented. His hair was black, not soft black, but the hard shine of obsidian. There was a pale scar disappearing beneath his collar, quick as a secret. He should have looked theatrical. He didn't. He looked inevitable. A donor drifted toward the Madonna with a champagne flute. I stood too quickly. "Please don't." The man blinked. "Excuse me? The humidity from your glass is enough to lift the varnish." I took the flute from his hand before I could think better of it and set it on a passing tray. "Now you can donate with both hands." There was a startled laugh behind him. Not from the donor, from one of the men near Dante. I expected my supervisor to faint. Instead, the man in black simply watched me a second longer, then turned away as if filing something. I hated that it felt like being touched. The attack began with sound, a pop, too sharp for a dropped tray, then another. For one stupid breath, I thought a light bulb had blown. Then the man beside the fountain folded. Someone screamed. Glass burst inward from the courtyard doors. The room snapped apart. Men in tuxedos turned into men with guns so fast it made my stomach turn. Donors hit the marble. A saint toppled from her plinth and shattered one painted hand across the floor. I should have run. Instead, I saw Dante Salvatore turn, quick and precise, shoving an older woman behind a pillar before drawing a pistol from nowhere. He moved like a man who had rehearsed disaster until it became muscle. 1 shot, 2. No wasted motion, no shouting. Then something flashed near the entry arch. He jerked. At first I thought he had ducked. Then I saw the blood. It ran dark from just below his jaw. Thin at first, then faster, sliding across his collar in a line too bright against white linen. Everyone else seemed to move away from him. Instinct, fear, command, I don't know. But there was a gap around him for half a second, and in that gap he put his hand to his neck and looked down as if annoyed. I was already there. I do not remember crossing the floor. I remember dropping to my knees. I remember tearing the linen presentation ribbon from my waist. I remember his men shouting something in Italian that sounded like a threat and a prayer. I pressed the linen hard to his throat, his gaze cut to mine. Up close, he was worse, not handsome, too severe for that. His mouth was set like restraint, physically hurt him. His eyes were so dark they seemed to absorb the room around them. Blood slid hot over my fingers. "Hold this," I said. He didn't move. I put his hand over mine and pushed harder. His breath caught once, sharply. "Don't speak," I whispered. Everything in him stopped. Not his pulse. I felt that, frantic and hard under my fingers, but something else. His chest, his eyes, the air between us. Around us, gunfire cracked through the gallery. Somewhere glass kept breaking. One of his men shot past us, barking orders, but Dante Salvatore only stared at me like I had reached into a locked place with bare hands. "Sir," someone shouted. "Tourniquet kit," I snapped without looking up. "And if any of you pull me off him before the bleeding slows, he dies stupid." Nobody moved for one beat. Then they obeyed. His hand came up, covering mine where it pressed his throat, not to remove it, to hold it there. He was bleeding over my dress. My knees were on cold marble littered with plaster and pearls from some woman's broken necklace. His breath touched my cheek, controlled even now, even when it shouldn't have been. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "What are you?" he asked, voice roughened by blood and danger. "A conservator." His mouth shifted like he almost smiled and thought better of it. "Of course." Men closed around us then. One of them, blonde, hard-eyed female, knelt on my other side with a med kit. Another, sick through the chest, aimed toward the shattered doors while muttering what sounded like a furious prayer about cardio and premature death. "Boss, move." Dante stood with my hand still trapped between his and the linen at his throat. I rose because he brought me up with him. "No," I said, because he was swaying and someone had to. His eyes dropped to my blood-covered fingers. "Restore," he said quietly, as if testing the word. "You're coming with me." I opened my mouth to refuse. I even meant to. Then one of the dead men near the door rolled enough for me to see his wrist. Burned into the inside under expensive watch leather was a tiny mark I knew too well. A bell. My father's mark. I stopped cold. Dante saw my face change. He missed nothing. "What did you see?" I looked at the corpse, then back at him. My hand was still at his throat. His pulse hit my fingertips like a warning. The blonde woman followed my gaze and swore. Dante's expression hardened into something colder than fear. "Take her," he said. I didn't fight until they were already moving me through the staff corridor, past broken display glass and a weeping donor with blood on her shoes. I twisted once, just enough to look back. He was still watching me. Then the steel security door shut between us, and locked. I woke to the sound of water against stone. For a long second I thought I was in my apartment above the tram line, with its cracked sink and narrow bed and view of Milan brick. Then I opened my eyes to a ceiling painted with faded cherubs and understood that my life had been taken somewhere my keys could not find. The room smelled faintly of lemon wax and clean linen. Too large, too quiet. There were iron bars hidden inside the window frame, not obvious prison bars, just enough to make a point. Beyond the glass, the lake spread silver under a pale morning sky. A tray waited on the bedside table, coffee, toast, aspirin, folded clothes that were not mine. I sat up too fast and found dried blood on my wrists. Not mine. The door opened before I could decide whether to scream or throw something. The woman from the gallery stepped in carrying a tablet and a face designed for bad news. She was maybe 30, severe in a charcoal suit. Dark hair braided so tightly it looked weaponized. "You're safe," she said. That is a very flexible word. Something almost human crossed her mouth. Bianca Russo, Sofia Bellini. I know. Of course she did. She set the tablet down. "You're here because the men who attacked the museum were looking for something connected to your father." The sentence landed in pieces. My father. Connected. Attacked. My father restored altarpieces, I said, and forgot birthdays. He wasn't part of this. Bianca's eyes moved once around the room, including the invisible guns and visible money. "Your father worked for men who were." I laughed once, sharply. "No. You can keep saying that if it comforts you. It won't change the files." I got out of bed. My legs shook, whether from fear or anger I couldn't tell. I want my phone. No. I want to leave. No. I want. The door opened again. He did not knock. Dante Salvatore crossed the threshold in a fresh black shirt open at the throat, a bandage white against tan skin where I had pressed the wound closed. Seeing him upright should have relieved me. It didn't. It made the room smaller. Bianca stepped back without seeming to. He looked at me first. Not the coffee tray, not the door, not the fact that I was barefoot and furious. His gaze dropped to my hands as if checking whether the blood had stayed there overnight. Did you sleep? Did you abduct me? Yes. The honesty offended me more than a lie would have. He walked in, slow and controlled, and the floor seemed to understand it had work to do. You can have your phone after my people clean it. My phone is not contaminated. In my world, everything is. I hated the way that made sense. I saw a mark on that man's wrist, I said. A bell. My father used to stamp it on crates from his workshop. That doesn't explain why I'm in a fortified villa with a criminal. No, he said. It explains why you're alive. I opened my mouth, closed it, hated him a little for noticing. A knock sounded somewhere down the hall, followed by a male voice lamenting, "Maria, if this omelet has butter in it, my funeral will be your fault." Bianca exhaled through her nose, and chaos arrives. The man who leaned into the doorway was built like a battering ram in a navy suit. His beard was trimmed, his expression theatrically wounded. He carried 2 plates and looked at Dante with the exhaustion of a man overqualified for nonsense. "Boss, the kitchen has declared war on my macros." Dante didn't look away from me. "Nico." "I know," the big man said. "Human life hangs in the balance. Mine. Specifically my abdominal definition." His gaze landed on me. He brightened instantly. "Ah, you're the art girl. Good. Tell Maria olive oil is not a personality trait." A woman's voice floated from the corridor, warm and dangerous. "Tell him if he says one more word about carbohydrates, I'll bury him in focaccia." Nico put a hand to his heart. "You hear how she flirts with me, cruelly." Against all reason, I laughed. It escaped me before I could stop it, small and breathless. Dante's eyes shifted. "Not much." "Enough." Nico pointed at me like I'd validated his existence. "There. A witness. She understands my suffering." "No," Bianca said. "She understands you're ridiculous." Nico sighed. "One day Maria will see the disciplined athlete beneath this pain." "Under all of it?" Bianca asked. "How tragic." Dante flicked 2 fingers. Nico straightened at once. That was what unsettled me most about Dante. He never raised his voice. Men moved anyway. "You'll stay inside today," he said to me. "You'll eat. Bianca will bring you your father's file." "Why?" "Because I want you to read it before you accuse the wrong dead man." The words were cold enough to sting. I folded my arms because my hands suddenly needed somewhere to go. "And if I refuse?" He came closer. Not threateningly. Worse. Deliberately. The lake light caught in the hard line of his cheekbone. I could smell his cologne now, dark cedar over something colder. Night air maybe, or stone. My pulse did something humiliating. I stepped back, and the bed struck my knees. He stopped exactly far enough away not to touch me. "Then refuse," he said. "But you still won't leave. You can't keep me here forever." His gaze dropped, just once, to my mouth, then rose again so fast I almost thought I invented it. "Forever is inefficient," he said. "A few days will do." There was a beat too long, too full. One of those spaces where the air changed and I didn't know the rules of it. Nico rescued me by setting a plate on the table with solemn ceremony. "If you plan to continue being kidnapped, Signorina, you should eat while the eggs are legal." "Thank you," I said, because he felt like oxygen. Maria appeared behind him with a basket of bread and a look that could have disciplined armies. She was round, silver-haired, a prin immaculate, eyes instantly kind when they met mine. You are too thin, she declared. Nico made a strangled noise. You see, she notices only my deepest fears. Maria slapped the back of his head with a dish towel. Go stand somewhere armed and useful. He went, muttering, This is emotional abuse. Bianca picked up the tablet. Dante stepped back toward the door. Read the file, he said. Why should I trust anything in this house? He paused with one hand on the brass knob. His throat moved beneath the bandage. You shouldn't, he said. Trust what your father hid instead. Then he left. The room held his absence like a second body. My father's file arrived in a black leather folder that smelled faintly of smoke. I knew before I opened it that someone had curated the truth for me. The pages were too clean, the photographs too crisp, the timeline too neat. Real grief was never neat. Real men weren't either. Still, the first photograph made me sit down. It showed my father outside a chapel I recognized from old family pictures, younger by 20 years and thinner in the face, carrying a wooden transit case stamped with a small bell mark from his workshop. Beside him stood a boy of about 16 with a bruised jaw and watchful eyes already too old for his face. Dante. I stared long enough that the edges of the image blurred. When Maria came in with lunch, she found me with both hands flat on the folder as though it might run. She set down a bowl of tomato broth and crossed herself at the sight of my expression. What did they give you? A version, I said. Aha. She nodded like that answered everything. Then eat, before the version eats you. I looked up. Did you know my father? No, but I know men who hide grief inside paperwork. Same smell. I almost smiled. Maria had that gift. She made the room remember kitchens existed. By afternoon, Bianca escorted me downstairs to what could only be called a private archive and only by people who had never seen Obsession. Climate controls whispered overhead. Shelves held ledgers, deeds, bound correspondence, old account books with gilt spines and the discreet ugliness of power. A long oak table dominated the center. At one end lay a fire-damaged folio inside a preservation box. Dante stood beside it with his jacket off. Sleeves rolled once. The bandage at his throat had been replaced by steri strips crossing the wound in pale precision. My fingers remembered the place before I let myself. This was found in the museum service tunnel after the shooting, he said. One of my men died for it. I moved to the table by instinct, irritation losing to training. And you think I can restore it? I know you can. You seem very confident for a criminal. He met that without blinking. You seem very brave for a civilian. The folio was bad. Fire-eaten edges, water-staining, collapsed spine. But the internal paper stock was rag, old and dense, salvageable if handled by someone patient and a little devout. My father taught me on paper like this, I murmured before I could stop myself. Something shifted in Dante's face, gone almost instantly. I put on gloves, tested the fibers, lifted one warped page toward the light. Under the burned bloom there was writing. And beneath that, fainter still. Another layer something. Arrest and overwritten. Palimpsest, I said. Bianca looked between us. In Italian, half the old church ran on reused paper. Scrape, write, repent, repeat. A sound escaped Nico from the doorway, where he had apparently materialized with an espresso and the attention span of a magpie. That may be the hottest thing anyone has ever said in this house. Bianca didn't turn. Leave. I'm guarding. You're eavesdropping. Both can be true. Dante ignored them. What do you need? I listed solvents. Blotters, weights, magnification. He listened like procurement was warfare. Within minutes, 2 assistants I hadn't seen entered carrying everything. That was his world in miniature. Ask, and reality rearranged itself. Hours passed, my shoulders tightened, my gloves spotted with soot and adhesive residue. Dante stayed in the room for most of it, saying almost nothing, taking calls in low Italian at the far window. Men came and went. Nobody interrupted me. At dusk, I found the first name. Not in the obvious ledger entries, shipping routes, donations, shell foundations, but in the erased undertext revealed under infrared and patience. El Castiello. The ink was old. The pressure deep. Meant to matter. Who is that? I asked. Bianca looked to Dante first. That told me enough. Leonardo Castiello, Dante said. My father's underboss, dead according to public record. According to your face, not dead enough. Nico drifted farther inside with the espresso tray. That's a beautifully threatening sentence. We should embroider it on pillows. I looked at him despite myself. Do you ever stop talking? Only during squats and near explosions. There was an explosion yesterday. Exactly. Personal growth. Dante's mouth nearly moved. I found that more disorienting than the gunfire had been. Another page gave me something else, a symbol pressed in the margin, my father's bell, tiny and deliberate, beside a notation in his hand. Not safe with Tommaso. The room went still. Tommaso? I asked. Father Tommaso Riva? Bianca swore low. Who is he? Dante's voice flattened. The priest who heard my first confession. The words should have sounded absurd. They didn't. Not in that room. Not with old money and old sin breathing from the shelves. I looked from the note to Dante. My father knew him? Yes. And didn't trust him? Yes. Something cold moved through me. My father had not died in some archive accident if he'd been writing warnings into erased ledgers like a hunted man. Thunder rolled over the lake. Dante took the page from under the magnifier only after I nodded permission. Even then, he touched the margin as if the paper might bite. His knuckles were scarred. Old breaks. Old decisions. Why didn't you tell me my father knew you? I asked. A beat. Because I wanted to confirm what he left before I used his name to keep you here. The honesty did not make me less angry. That made me trust him more than I wanted. Outside, tires crunched on the gravel too fast. Voices rose. Bianca moved first, hand to weapon. Dante set down the folio and reached for his jacket with that same terrible efficiency from the museum. Nico put down his espresso like a man sacrificing a child. Bianca's earpiece crackled. Front gate breach. The air in the archive changed all at once. Dante looked at me. Not the ledger. Me. Stay with Bianca. I can help. No. His gaze dropped to my stained gloves. You already did. He turned away. And for one stupid second I wanted to catch his sleeve. Dante. When Sofia Bellini bent over damaged paper, the whole room leaned with her. He had known her father's name before she stepped into the museum, had known Bellini had once carried him half-conscious through a sacristy corridor that smelled of candle wax and blood. But he had not expected the daughter. Not the same careful hands, not the same refusal to tremble, until after. And he had not told her the worst part, that when her fingers pressed his throat and she whispered, "Don't speak," every locked door in him had blown open with the sound of his mother dying. The first shots from the courtyard windows cut off the thought. The attack on the villa did not begin with gunfire. It began with the dogs going silent. I had never thought of silence as a warning before Dante. Now I heard it everywhere. Bianca shoved me down the back corridor the moment the first alarm tripped. Red emergency lights washed the walls, turning the old oil portraits into a procession of wounded saints. Somewhere above us, men were moving fast and not shouting. That was worse. This way, Bianca said. Where's Dante? Busy. I hate that answer. You'll survive it. We turned a corner and nearly collided with Nico, who had a shotgun in one hand and, impossibly, a hard-boiled egg in the other. He glanced at me, then at Bianca. If I die on a low-carb diet, tell Maria I always wanted pasta at the end. Bianca blinked. You're eating during an assault? It's protein. I'm under stress. A shot cracked somewhere overhead. Plaster dust drifted from the ceiling. Nico sighed. See, hostile to wellness. He passed me a small pistol. I stared at it. No, I said. Good, he said. I was testing your judgment. Keep it pointed down if you absolutely must panic. Bianca jerked her head toward a narrow stair. Tell her. The wine cellar looked like every wealthy Italian fantasy until you noticed the steel reinforcement in the stone and the vent slits cut to shoot through. Racks of old Barolo lined the walls. The air was cool enough to tighten my skin. Bianca locked us in, checked 2 camera feeds, then pressed a finger to her earpiece. I heard my pulse, my father's note, Castiello, Tommaso, and under all of it, the memory of Dante's throat beneath my hand. "You can ask," Bianca said without looking at me. I leaned against the table in the center, where a decanter gleamed like trapped blood. "How long have you known him?" "Since he was 19. That's not an answer. It's the one you get." I wrapped my arms around myself. Does he always do this? Stand between danger and everyone else? She checked the feed again. Yes. One screen flickered. A figure moved across the courtyard. Then another. Nico peered over Bianca's shoulder. "If one of those bastards bleeds on the stone lions, the groundskeeper will finally kill someone." Even Bianca smiled at that. A burst of static tore through her earpiece. Her expression changed. They're inside the east wing. The cellar door unlocked from the outside before she could stop it. I flinched. Nico pivoted, shotgun up. Dante stepped through, breathing hard, shirt dark at one shoulder with someone's blood. Not his, I thought first, then saw the red line at his jaw where the throat wound had reopened. Relief is an ugly, immediate thing. It moved through me so fast I could not hide it. His eyes found me across the cellar. The set of his shoulders changed by less than an inch. "Enough." "Basement secure?" he asked Bianca. "For now." He nodded. Then his gaze dropped to the pistol in my hand. "Why is she armed?" "I'm decorative," I said before Bianca could answer. For the first time, his eyes truly warmed. Just a fraction. Just enough to make me nervous. Nico took the pistol from me. "See? Humor under pressure. She's adapting. Terrible sign." Dante braced one hand on the table, and I saw the strain he thought he was hiding. Blood tracked slowly past the fresh steri strips. "You're hurt." "It's a cut." "So was the museum." His glance sharpened. "You should stay away from wounded men, Restorer. You make commands. That one saved your life." He held my gaze. I noticed. Bianca stepped aside to answer another call, and Nico moved to the camera bank, muttering about crossfire and the decline of professional standards. For one small pocket of time, the cellar narrowed to stone, dust, and Dante's blood at the edge of my vision. "Sit down," I said quietly. "No." I came closer anyway. He didn't stop me. That was somehow worse than resistance would have been. Up close, the scent of gunpowder clung to him beneath cedar and cold air. I took the clean cloth Bianca had dropped on the table and reached for his throat. His hand caught my wrist. Not hard. It would have been easier if it had been hard. The whole cellar seemed to pause. My pulse tripped. His thumb rested against the inside of my wrist, right over the place my blood ran visible and stupidly honest. "Dante," I said, and even to me my voice sounded different. He looked at my mouth. Then away. Then back. Slower this time, like the second look cost him something. "Don't," he said. "I'm helping." "That isn't what I meant." The words passed between us like a match in a locked room. From the cameras came a muffled crash. Neither of us moved. Then he released me first. Restraint. Clean and brutal. I pressed the cloth to his throat. The muscle there jumped beneath my fingers. He went completely still. Every dangerous inch of him held on a line so tight I could feel it humming. "There," I murmured. "Hold that." His hand came up over mine, the way it had in the museum, but now there was history in it. Awareness, a thing neither of us named. "Why do you keep doing that?" he asked. "What?" "Talking to me like I'm just a man." I swallowed. "Maybe because you're bleeding like one." Something flickered across his face. Not pain. Recognition. Worse. Nico turned from the monitors. "I hate to interrupt whatever gothic scene this is, but one of the shooters is in the rosemary hedge and I've been waiting years to dislike a man this specifically." Bianca got a message and swore. The breach was a diversion. Someone searched the archive. Dante straightened at once. The softness, if that was what it had been, vanished. For the ledger, I said. Yes. Did they get it? No. Bianca's tone was clipped. But now they know we have it. Dante took the cloth from my hand. His fingertips brushed my knuckles in the exchange. Accidental. Not accidental enough. Stay here, he said. I hated how my chest tightened at the order. And if I don't? He looked at me for a long second, the cellar lights catching the scar disappearing under his collar. Then I come back for you before I finish the war, he said. No one in the room reacted. Maybe because they were professionals. Maybe because they knew he did not speak idly. He turned to leave. I caught the back of his sleeve before I could stop myself. He stopped, not breathing, not moving. Only stopped. When he looked back, the entire world felt too close to my skin. Be careful, I said, and hated how small it sounded beside gunfire and blood. His expression changed so slightly I might have imagined it. But his free hand came up, just once, and touched the inside of my wrist where he had held it. Then he was gone. The lock fell back into place behind him. After the villa attack, nobody pretended I was temporary anymore. Bianca stopped calling it protection and started calling it protocol. Maria moved my clothes from the guest room into the suite overlooking the lower garden. Nico began appearing at doorways with weather reports, protein bars, and warnings delivered like jokes. Only Dante changed nothing in his language at all, which meant I noticed every small thing he changed in his behavior. He no longer let anyone else drive me when we moved between properties. He no longer left a room before knowing where I was in it. He no longer hid the fact that men searched every corridor before I walked it. If he had said, "You matter now," I might have trusted it less. 3 days after the attack, Maria found me in the sunroom with a restoration lamp, a porcelain swallow, and Dante's mother's chapel inventory spread across the floor. The swallow had shattered years earlier and been badly glued by someone impatient. Old adhesive yellowed in the cracks. You chose the saddest bird in the villa, Maria said. It was already sad. She made a sympathetic sound and set down coffee. Good. Better to work on honest things. I looked up. Did this belong to his mother? Maria nodded. On the chapel windowsill. She liked swallows. Said they remembered where home was. I stared at the fine white fractures running through the porcelain body. Why wasn't it restored? Maria shrugged. Some griefs are easier to dust than mend. The words sat in me all day. By evening, I had the old glue softened, the pieces aligned, the seams filled. Instead of hiding the breaks completely, I laid thin gold into the lines, a reversible lacquer technique my father loved because it refused the lie of untouched beauty. When Dante came in, I was bent over the bird with a magnifier on my forehead and a streak of gold on my wrist. The room smelled of shellac, lamp heat, and the orange peel Maria had left to freshen the air. He stopped in the doorway. Am I interrupting? You're paying for the lamp, I said. So, technically, this is collaboration. His gaze went to the swallow in my hands, then to the gold seams. It was broken. It still is. I set down the brush. That doesn't mean it has to pretend. Something moved under the surface of his face. I was beginning to understand that with Dante, emotion did not show. It deepened. He came closer, slow enough for me to hear my own breathing. The evening light caught in the thin scar at his throat. Why gold? Because if I hide the damage badly, the piece lies. If I hide it well, the person looking at it does. And you prefer honesty. I prefer evidence. His mouth almost changed. Dangerous quality. I handed him the swallow. For a second I thought he wouldn't take it. Then those scarred hands I had seen around guns and blood and ancient paper closed around fragile porcelain with impossible care. It's stronger now, he said quietly. In the repaired places, yes. His gaze lifted to me. That felt like a door opening somewhere I had no business entering. I looked down first. Cowardice, perhaps, or innocence clinging to technique when the air felt strange. There's more in the ledger, I said, because work was safer. an erased schedule of transfers through the chapel annex 15 years ago. Some entries are in my father's shorthand. Can you read it? Most of it. Show me. We moved to the library table. I spread the copy pages, talking faster than necessary because when I was actually feeling something, silence became dangerous. Dante listened with his forearms braced on the wood, the smell of his cologne threaded with fresh night air. Once, while I reached across him for the UV images, my sleeve brushed his hand. He went still. So did I. Almost. Then the library door opened and Bianca stepped in. Tommaso is here. The room changed instantly. Dante straightened. Who cleared him? Maria saw him at the chapel gate. He said he came to pray for the dead from the museum attack. I looked at the ledger pages. At my father's warning, don't let him see those. Dante's eyes cut to mine. He won't. Tell me what you know, I said. He didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. You still trust him? I trust patterns, he said. I'm checking whether he fits one. And if my father died because people checked too slowly? That landed. His jaw tightened. For the first time since the museum, real anger showed on him. Not at me, but because of me. I'm trying to keep you alive. So am I. Bianca's phone buzzed. She looked down, frowned. Your museum apartment was searched this afternoon. I went cold. What? No sign of forced entry. Whoever it was knew what they wanted. My father's papers. I stood so quickly the chair legs struck the marble. I have notebooks there. Inventory slips. Personal things. I'll send a team, Dante said. I'm going. No. It's my home. It was. The word hit like a slap. I stared at him. You don't get to say that like you're doing me a kindness. He took one step forward. If you go there tonight, they'll use you to draw me out. Maybe stop making me sound like bait. A beat. Heavy and wrong. Then he said, lower. You are not bait. The force under it made me still. Not bait. Not safe either. Something harder to survive than both. I looked away first, furious with myself for the heat that climbed my throat. I need my father's notebooks. I'll bring them. You can't know what matters. He reached past me for the page edge, and his knuckles brushed my lip by accident or not. Accident enough. Gold powder transferred there from my skin. His hand stopped. The room narrowed to that one point of contact. He looked at the gold on my mouth as if it offended him personally. Then he pulled his hand back and closed it into a fist. Almost. I'll know if it's written in his hand, he said, voice gone rough. He left with Bianca before I could answer. Later, when Maria brought me chamomile, she found me staring at the restored swallow on the mantel. It's beautiful, she said. It looks stronger than it is. Maria smiled gently. So do people. Only after she went downstairs did I notice Nico lingering outside the half-open door with a tray, clearly having overheard enough to be moved beyond his nutritional concerns. He glanced from the bird to me and sighed like a romantic forced into tactical service. I'm never telling the boss about this, he said. He paused. I'm telling him immediately. The ambush came dressed as a funeral. Father Tommaso had insisted on a private mass in the lakeside chapel for the men who died at the museum and the guards lost at the villa. Dante resisted long enough for me to notice. Then he agreed in the hard, flat way of men honoring ghosts rather than priests. Rain slicked the chapel steps black. Inside, candle smoke climbed through cold stone air. The altar was small, the frescoes dim with age, saints half faded by generations of kneeling. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, the whole building felt like something holding its breath. I stood near the back with Maria, fingers tight around a prayer card I had no intention of reading. Nico hovered by the side aisle in a suit that hid 2 weapons and perhaps 3 snacks. Bianca, pale from too little sleep, watched every door. Tommaso's voice rolled soft over Latin and ash. He was broad-faced, silver at the temples, the sort of priest old women trusted with bank passwords and bad marriages. He had blessed Dante as a child. He had been in photographs at Salvatore baptisms, funerals, confirmations. My father had written "not safe" with Tommaso in a margin he thought someone might one day save. The realization sat like a nail under my ribs. Dante stood in the front pew alone. That was the thing about power. It never looked lonelier than in church. When the first shooter rose from the pew behind the choir screen, I saw him before anyone else, because he was not praying right. His shoulders were set wrong. His right hand was already too low inside his jacket. I didn't think. I moved. "Dante!" The gun cleared leather. The chapel erupted. Bianca shouted. Nico fired. Someone screamed as candle glass shattered against stone. I hit Dante just as the first shot went wide. We went down together in the aisle, hard enough to drive breath from me. He rolled on instinct, covering me with his body before I understood what position we were in. Marble. Wool. Gunpowder. The brutal shelter of his weight. The second shooter appeared from the sacristy side door. Dante drew and fired once over my shoulder. The man dropped without finishing his step. I had never been this close to deliberate killing. Not theater, not headlines, not a body already cooling in a museum gallery. A man alive 1 second. Dead the next, because Dante decided it. I stared. He caught my face in one hand. Sophia. I looked at him. His expression changed. Tiny. Devastating. He had seen the moment I understood what he was. Around us, men moved. Nico tackled someone into a confessional, shouting, "I hope God counts Lisa's cardio." Bianca was on her knees behind a pillar, returning fire with blood on her sleeve. Tommaso crouched near the altar, shouting prayers or orders. I couldn't tell which. "Can you stand?" Dante asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. He got us behind the stone baptismal font. His hand stayed at the back of my neck the whole way, steady and possessive, and somehow more intimate than a kiss could have been. Another shot cracked. Stone chipped near us. "Listen to me." He crouched, both hands on my shoulders now. "When Nico opens the side passage, you run with Maria to the crypt stairs. Do not stop for me. No." His eyes flashed. "This isn't negotiation. I know what this is." He stilled. Maybe it was the first time I'd said it without flinching. Nico shouted from the side aisle, "Doors jammed, boss, but on the bright side, I'm finally getting my steps in." Bianca cursed in fluent, murderous Italian. Dante's mouth tightened. He looked back at me. Rainwater from someone's coat had darkened his cuffs. A streak of another man's blood marked his jaw. "You should be afraid of me," he said. Stage 2 arrived in me then, quiet and terrible. "I'm not," I whispered. "That's the problem." Something in him broke open so sharply I heard it without sound. He closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them changed. "Dante." He had stopped himself 3 times already. In the archive, when gold dust brightened her mouth and he wanted to drag his thumb across it just to see if she would shake. In the cellar, when her wrist fit under his hand like trust he hadn't earned. 2 nights earlier, outside her door, when he heard her crying very quietly and stood there until dawn instead of going in. Now there was blood on chapel stone, and the impossible girl who had once pressed his throat and whispered his mother's last words was looking at him like the danger was inside her, not him. It was then he admitted what he should have cut out days ago. It was not her face, not her innocence, not even the courage. It was that first defiant mercy that she had silenced him to save him, and he had been lost from that moment. He bent and kissed her anyway. The kiss was not hungry. It was worse. It was careful. His mouth touched mine like he was asking forgiveness for something he had not done yet. My hands found his jacket because I had to hold on somewhere. The world did not disappear. Guns still sounded. Men still shouted. But there was this impossible pocket of stillness inside it, and in that stillness I felt exactly how hard he was holding himself back. When he pulled away, he stayed close enough that his breath brushed my lips. "If I start," he said hoarsely, "I won't stop where I should." I had no practiced answer for that. No bold line, only the truth, bare and humiliating. "If you kiss me again," I whispered, "I won't know how to stay who I was." His hand tightened once at my neck. Restorer. The word had gone warm around the edges. Then Nico got the side passage open with a shout of triumph and profanity, and the war found us again. Dante shoved me toward the stairs just as another man burst from the sacristy with a knife. Dante met him halfway. There was no elegance in it this time. No distance. Only violence stripped to function. He drove the man into the stone wall so hard I heard bone, then turned in time to shoot a fourth attacker reaching for Bianca. Maria dragged me toward the crypt stairs. I looked back once. Dante was in the aisle under candle smoke and broken glass, breathing hard, his throat bared where the wound had reopened. He did not look human then. He looked like the promise men made when they ran out of prayers. And somehow, horribly, he still chose my safety before the kill. By the time we reached the crypt, sirens were climbing the road from the village. Bianca appeared 2 minutes later with blood on her sleeve and murder in her eyes. Nico came after her, limping and clutching his side. "Is it bad?" Maria cried, reaching for him. "This?" Nico looked down. "No." The morning after the chapel, the villa smelled like bleach, coffee, and gun oil. War had a housekeeping rhythm I had never imagined. Men mopped blood from old stone before breakfast. Bianca took calls while someone stitched the torn sleeve she refused to replace. Nico sat at the kitchen table with an ice pack on his ribs and a face arranged into martyrdom while Maria ignored him, with the intensity of a woman in love or armed conflict. I asked for egg whites, he informed the room. Maria set down a plate of ricotta-filled ravioli. "You got religion." He looked at me, wounded. "Do you see this, Sophia? Do you see how my body is being sabotaged? You brought a shotgun to mass," I said, "and yet it was the carbohydrates that nearly killed me." Maria clicked her tongue and poured my coffee. Her hand lingered once on my shoulder. Acceptance, not softness exactly, something stronger. Across the kitchen, Dante stood by the long window in a dark suit with his phone to his ear, speaking low, clipped Italian. He had changed the bandage at his throat, but I still saw the place my fingers had been every time he turned. He never looked openly at me when other people were in the room. Somehow that made me feel it more. When he ended the call, he came straight to me. "You leave in an hour." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Excuse me? Swiss border safe house first, then Florence if the route holds. I'm not a package." "No," he said, "you're a target." Bianca set down her tablet. 2 cars, decoy route north, minimal staff. Nico raised a hand. I assume I'm included because if I'm not, I'd like to formally note that I prefer betrayal with warning. "You're driving the second car," Dante said. Nico looked proud and offended at once. "Excellent. Nothing supports healing like trauma and traffic." I set down my cup. And not leaving while Tommaso is still out there and Leonardo Castiello is digging through my father's life. Dante's gaze held mine, unreadable and too steady. "That is exactly why you're leaving." Anger arrived fast enough to be useful. Fear usually came after, when I was alone. My father left those notes for a reason, and you've already helped me with them. "You mean I've already helped enough?" His expression did not change, but the air around him did. "Sophia, no." I pushed back from the table. "You do not get to decide when my part in this becomes convenient for you." He stepped closer, and the kitchen quieted around us without anyone pretending not to listen. "This is not convenience. It feels like disposal." That landed. I knew it the second it did, his jaw set. One small towel from a man built almost entirely of restraint. Maria drew Nico toward the pantry by one sleeve. Bianca found sudden intense interest in her messages. Dante leaned one hand on the back of my chair, not touching me, trapping me there anyway by force of presence alone. "If they take you, they use you." "You keep saying that like I don't understand." "You don't." His voice dropped. "Because if they take you, I burn everything. There is no strategy after that." The words should have frightened me. Instead, they put a strange ache under my ribs. Almost. I looked away first. Maybe I'm tired of being moved around like something breakable. His eyes flicked to my hands. You're not breakable. No? No. He straightened. You're leaving anyway. I hated him for how much I heard in that. Bianca escorted me upstairs to pack. Halfway down the corridor, she said, "If you want my advice, take the exit." I didn't ask. No. But I like you enough to offend you, honestly. I stopped outside my room. Would you go? Her face closed a little. I already stayed once. That told me more than she intended. While she took a call at the far end of the hall, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my cleaned phone. Dante's people had returned it after stripping contacts, messages, everything except the numbers I could recite from muscle memory. There was one person they had missed because I had never saved him. Old Signor Bassi, my landlord in Milan. My father had hidden things and walls his whole life. After he died, I found the loose brick behind the wardrobe in my apartment. Inside it sat a tin tobacco box of notes I had never shown anyone, not even because I didn't know what half of it meant. If I left now, Castiello's men would get there first. I called Bassi. He answered on the fourth ring, breathless, suspicious, belovedly rude. If this is about the plumbing, I already hate you. It's Sophia. Please listen. In my bedroom behind the wardrobe, loose brick on the left, there's a tin box. Don't open it. Just take it to the concierge desk at the Brera Institute and leave it for... The line clicked. Not ended. Clicked. A second line lifting. My blood turned to ice. Signorina, Bassi said, there are men here. The phone died. I stood so fast the suitcase toppled. Bianca came through the door with her weapon drawn before I made a sound. One look at my face, and she knew. What did you do? I could not breathe enough to answer. Her expression turned murderous. Not loud. Worse. Focused. She hit her earpiece. Compromised line. Immediate move. Everything blurred after that. Men in hallways. Doors opening. Maria clutching her rosary and her handbag. Nico hauling luggage with one hand and pressing his other to his side like pain could wait. Dante met us at the stairs. His gaze went from my face to the phone in my hand. He understood instantly. No one had ever made me feel smaller with silence. I had to get my father's box, I said, hating how it sounded. Childish. Thin. He closed his hand around the phone and turned to Bianca. Route spurned. We go now. The convoy reached the lower road before the first SUV hit us. Metal screamed. Nico's car clipped the stone barrier and fishtailed hard. Bianca swore and shoved me down just as glass burst inward in a silver storm. Bullets hit the side panels in hard, obscene bursts. Someone wanted me alive enough not to spray the center mass. That realization was the worst one. Bianca fired through the shattered rear window. Stay down. The driver slumped. Blood sprayed the dash. The car swerved. Dante's hand came out of nowhere, one arm across my body, bracing me as our car slammed sideways into the rock wall. Pain flashed white through my shoulder. Maria cried out in the front. Nico's voice roared over the comms, followed by a curse inventive enough to deserve applause. Another vehicle cut across the road ahead. Deliberate. A message. Bianca shoved open her door and returned fire from the gravel, standing between me and the open line of attack, as if her body were architecture. I saw the exact second she was hit. Her shoulder jerked back. Then again, high near the ribs, she stayed standing. Something broke in me. Bianca! Dante was already out, dragging me behind the engine block with one hand while shooting with the other. Efficient. Terrible. One man down. Another. No wasted fury, only result. My mistake had drawn them here. My mistake had put Bianca in the road. Nico skidded in beside us from the second car, bleeding from the forehead and panting. Good news, he said wildly. I hate everyone. Bianca dropped to one knee at last, teeth bared against pain, still shooting. Dante looked at me once. Just once. There was no rage in his face, That was worse than rage would have been. There was consequence. Later, when the surviving attackers were dead and Bianca was packed into the helicopter with blood soaking the front of her shirt, Dante pressed a passport and a keycard into my hand at the private airstrip. "Go," he said. The plane waited with its door open. Florence. Safety. Exit. I could still leave. He was giving me the road, even after what I had done. I looked at Bianca on the stretcher, at Maria crying into Nico's borrowed jacket, at Dante standing very still in the wind, becoming colder by the second. Then I took my museum identification badge from my wallet, snapped it in half, and dropped it on the tarmac. "I'm not leaving," I said. He stared at the broken plastic at my feet, then at me. "Sophia?" "No." My voice shook. "This cost blood already, mine too, now." The plane door stayed open behind me. I walked past it and back toward him. I walked back in. Bianca survived surgery. That fact reached the villa 3 hours after we dragged ourselves back through its gates, and the whole house exhaled at once. Maria sat down hard at the kitchen table and thanked every saint she could name, including 2 I was fairly sure she invented on the spot. Nico, pale and stitched and bandaged under a fresh shirt, announced he would like it recorded that stress had dissolved at least 6 pounds of disciplined muscle. 4, Maria said. He pressed a hand to his chest. "Cruel, while I'm concussed." "You're dramatic," she corrected. Dante said nothing at all. That frightened me more than shouting would have. He moved through the house like a blade wrapped in silk quiet, precise, lethal by implication alone. Men took orders in whispers. Phones rang and were silenced after one note. Every hour brought another update about road closures, church properties, shell companies, pressure points. Leonardo Castiello was no longer a dead name in a ledger. He was a breathing enemy with safe routes through old faith and older corruption. And Father Tommaso knew every Salvatore chapel key. The guilt from the road sat inside me like broken glass. Nobody said it aloud, but the bullet in Bianca's body had my fingerprints all over it. Dante never used that against me. Somehow that hurt worse. At dusk, Maria found me in the lower archive room with my father's tin box finally open on the table between UV lamps and acid-free folders. Dante's men had recovered it from Bossy's flat after the ambush. Bossy himself was safe, furious, and apparently telling the police imaginative lies about mold inspection. Inside the tin box were notebooks, a broken watch, and a folded watercolor. So old the paper had gone soft at the creases. When I opened it, my hands shook. It was the lakeside chapel, not as it stood now. Older, before renovation, before the sacristy wall was sealed. "There's a passage," I whispered. Maria leaned over my shoulder. Mother of God. A thin line in my father's hand marked a hidden corridor behind the old St. niches, leading from the crypt to the bell tower stair. In the margin he had written one sentence. "If the priest turns, don't use the front doors." I laughed once. It sounded wrong. Dante came in without sound. He had taken off his jacket but not the cold. "What did you find?" I turned the watercolor toward him. His face changed, not with surprise, but with recognition delayed too long. My mother showed me that passage once. Then why seal it? After the massacre, my father sealed every place she loved. The specificity of that landed in me. Not he lost someone, not some vague, tragic weather over a man. His father had bricked up grief and called it architecture. I traced the painted line with one fingertip. My father knew. Yes, and he hid this because of Tommaso. Dante looked at the note. Yes. Then he didn't die in the archive fire. A beat. No. The word hit so hard I had to grip the table. How? He was taken from his workshop 2 nights before the fire. Castiello wanted the ledger and the map. Bellini refused. I stared at him. You knew. I suspected. Today I confirmed. Today, my voice cracked around the edges. That was information I deserved yesterday. And yesterday I was keeping Bianca alive. The answer was brutal because it was true. I hated it anyway. Before I could say something unforgivable, a kitchen maid appeared in the doorway white as flour. Signorina Bellini? Father Tommaso sent a message from the hospital chapel. He says Bianca woke and is asking for you. Maria frowned. Bianca would ask for morphine before feelings. Dante's head lifted slowly. Dangerous. Who delivered it? The parish runner, the girl whispered. Everything in me should have recognized the trap. Instead, I heard Bianca woke and saw the blood on the road and knew, with the selfish panic of the guilty, that if she asked for me and I did not go, I'm coming, I said. No, Dante and Maria said together. I was already moving. The hospital chapel sat at the edge of town in a converted convent that still smelled faintly of incense and bleach. Too clean. Too quiet. Wrong from the first step. I knew it before the side door shut behind me and 3 men stepped out of the dark wearing orderly's shoes and killer's eyes. I reached for the pepper spray Bianca insisted I carry. One of them hit my wrist against the wall hard enough to make my fingers open. The last thing I saw before the hood came down was Father Tommaso stepping from behind the votive stand, looking older than fear and sad enough to be mistaken for a good man. When they pulled the hood off, I was in a stone room under the old chapel. Not the villa chapel. The city one. Older. Damp. Windowless. A single bare bulb. A chair bolted to the floor, my wrists tied in front with plastic restraints that bit deeper every time I pulled. The room smelled of wet limestone and candle wax. Tommaso sat opposite me on a crate, his hands folded like prayer had become habit instead of belief. I am sorry, he said. You should practice sounding less pleased with yourself. He winced, not at the words, at the accuracy. Your father had the same mouth when he was afraid. The mention of him nearly knocked the air out of me. Don't. Tommaso looked down. He died because he thought truth could save men who were already made by violence. Dante didn't kill him. No, Leonardo did. Tommaso's silence answered. Why help him? The priest rubbed one hand over his face, suddenly looking every year he owned. Because I watched what your father's death did not stop. Because I buried boys Dante's father trained to die before they could shave. Because Leonardo promised structure. Limits. If Salvatore power broke, the city might breathe. And how many people did you hand over to make yourself believe that? His eyes closed briefly. Enough. There it was. The mirror behind the mirror. Tommaso was not pure evil. He was cowardice dressed as mercy. The door opened. Leonardo Castiello stepped inside like he had been expected by the room itself. He was older than Dante by perhaps 20 years, silver at the temples, beautiful in the elegant, exhausted way of men who had spent a lifetime making ugliness look inevitable. His suit was charcoal, his smile was immaculate and empty. He looked at me too carefully. Bellini's daughter, he said. You have his hands. Unfortunately for you. His smile deepened, and his instinct for the wrong side. He crouched in front of me, not touching. Dante thinks he is different from the men who built him. That is charming. He is only younger. You sound disappointed he learned anything at all. Leonardo's gaze sharpened. I taught his father what power costs. Dante keeps pretending cost is optional. I understood then. The villain mirror. Leonardo was the future without restraint. Dante, if he ever stopped choosing against his own worst blood. Leonardo took the folded watercolor from his pocket and laid it on my knee. You will show me where Bellini hid the rest. I looked at the map. Then at him. My father died not telling you. He stood, sighed. Yes, but you are not your father. No, I thought. I wasn't. My hands were tied in front. That was his first mistake. I had spent years carrying solvents, scalpels, wax picks, tiny metal tools and hems and cuffs because restorers lived by preparation. When the hospital men took my bag, they missed the thin bone folder taped inside my sleeve. While Leonardo spoke to Tommaso in the doorway, I bent my wrist, worked the taped edge free, and slid it into my palm. Not a blade. Not enough to fight. Enough to work. Enough to survive. When Leonardo turned back toward me, I smiled for the first time since the road. Don't speak, I said softly, and drove the sharpened bone tip into the bare bulb above my head. Darkness swallowed the room whole. The dark helped me for 12 seconds. I counted them because panic was louder when it had no numbers. 1. The glass rained down. 2. Someone cursed. 3. I cut my left wrist on a shard and used the slickness to wrench harder against the restraints. 4. Tommaso shouted my name like it still had a claim on his mouth. 5. I found the edge of the crate with my knee. 6. I kicked it sideways into someone's shins. 7. A gun went off high and wild. 8. The room flashed white from the muzzle burst. 9. I saw the doorway. 10. I ran. By 12, someone had hands in my hair. I drove my head backward and felt cartilage give under it. Then I was through the door and in a corridor so narrow my shoulder scraped stone. Old chapel air, wet. Mold under incense. My father's map pulsed in my mind like something half-remembered from childhood stories. Left at the St. Niches. Up at the split stair. Avoid the front doors. Behind me, men shouted. One was Leonardo. One was not breathing right. I found the first niche by touch a broken plaster martyr without a face. Then the second. Then the seam in the wall my father had painted in faded umber, so subtle you'd miss it unless you knew what damage looked like before it failed. I pressed. The panel gave. I slid through into the hidden stair just as a flashlight beam cut the corridor behind me. The bell tower stair was steeper than any sane architect deserved. My wrists were free now but numb. My left palm bleeding. My breath loud enough to betray me. At the top was a trapdoor, and beyond that, if the map was true, the old ringing chamber open to the night. Below, the chapel filled with men. Above, bells waited. I reached the chamber and found moonlight striping the floor through louvered slats. Dust. Rope. Iron. A city spread beneath in patches of amber and wet slate. And no exit. Of course. I laughed once, quietly, and tasted blood at the back of my throat. A shape moved at the stair. Not Leonardo. Too still. Dante. For one insane second, I thought I had conjured him out of fear and need. Then he crossed the chamber in 4 silent strides, caught my face in both hands, and looked at me like checking I was solid hurt him. He said nothing. Neither did I. The reunion was desperate and almost wordless and more intimate than anything we had done in light. My fingers clutched his sleeves. His forehead touched mine once, hard. A prayer from a man who didn't pray anymore. Then he saw the blood on my wrists. His expression went lethal. I'm fine, I said too quickly. He looked at the restraints, marks, the cut palm, the bruise blooming at my hairline. No. Footsteps thundered below. Nico's voice echoed up from somewhere in the stairwell. If anyone asks, I always hated church architecture. I made a broken sound that might have been a laugh. Dante's mouth nearly changed in answer. Almost. He drew a knife from his jacket and cut the last strip of plastic from my right wrist, though it had already half split. His thumb brushed the mark it left. Very gently, like violence was easy and this was not. I got out, I said, because I needed him to know that. I know. How? He looked at the open wall panel behind me. You used the passage my mother showed me when I was 10. That landed strangely soft inside all the hard. Nico burst up through the trap a second later, with Maria's rosary around his wrist, a pistol in one hand, and soot on his cheek. Bianca says if either of you die before she's discharged, she'll personally resurrect and murder you. Where is she? I asked. In the van, angry enough to heal by force. He took one look at my face and gentled by a whole degree. Hey, you're standing. That's very inconvenient for the people who want it otherwise. Despite everything, I smiled. He patted his bandaged side. Also, for the record, if we survive tonight, I'm eating tiramisu in public and no one stops me. Gunfire cracked below. Dante pulled me behind the bell frame, body a shield without becoming one completely. He would not erase me from the fight. That, more than the shielding, told me how much had changed. Leonardo wants the ledger and the chapel roots, I whispered. Tommaso says he thinks breaking your family breaks the city free. Dante's jaw hardened. Leonardo thinks order belongs only to men willing to rot for it. You know him. Yes. How? A beat. Then, because he was at a breaking point, and there was no time left for curation, he gave me the truth. When my mother hid me in the chapel during the massacre, Leonardo was the one who found me after. His voice stayed flat. That made it worse. He wiped her blood off my face and told me breathing was a privilege men earn. Then he taught me how. I stared at him. There was the wound. Specific and monstrous. Not just loss. Education inside loss. Love mutilated into method. He helped raise you. He helped shape what survived. The stair door below burst open. Leonardo entered the bell chamber alone. Of course he did. Mirrors preferred privacy. He looked from Dante to me, to the blood on the floor with almost paternal disappointment. You see, he said to Dante, this is why women and sentiment are poor architecture. Dante stepped slightly in front of me. You built your empire out of priests and dead men, and you inherited it. Leonardo spread his hands. The only difference between us is that I don't tremble before necessary things. Dante was very still. I do not tremble. No. Leonardo smiled sadly. You stop breathing. There's a difference. He knew, or guessed enough to strike the right nerve. I felt Dante go colder beside me, which meant more danger, not less. Leonardo's gaze shifted to me. Did he tell you your father begged? Not for himself. For the boy he thought might still choose another life. I stepped around Dante before fear could stop me. My father died believing you were too small to understand mercy. Leonardo's expression sharpened for the first time. Good. Dante's hand closed around my wrist, not to drag me back, but to ground me there. Hot. Firm. Alive. Down below, more boots hit the stair. Bianca's people. Or Leonardo's. No way to tell yet. The chamber filled with bell-metal silence. Dante spoke without looking at me. When this starts, you go down the east ladder with Nico. No. Restorer. Warm now. Frayed by fear. I swallowed. I'm done going where I'm sent. His thumb pressed once at the inside of my wrist, exactly where he had touched me in the cellar, in the chapel, in every, almost since. Not agreement. Not surrender. Recognition. Leonardo raised his gun. Dante raised his. The bells above us trembled in the night wind. One of us might not survive what came next. The first shot hit iron. The bell shuddered so hard the whole chamber sang. Everything after happened at once and in fragments. Dante shoving me sideways as Leonardo fired. Nico dragging the east ladder down with a curse grand enough for opera. Men flooding the stair below in Salvatore black. Tommaso's voice somewhere in the stone, shouting for this to stop as though he had not lit half the fuse himself. I hit the floor hard enough to bruise both knees and saw Dante and Leonardo move to the smoke-gray moonlight like parallel lines, finally forced to cross. Neither wasted motion. Neither grand. This was not rage. This was expertise with history inside it. Nico hauled me toward the ladder. Please argue with me later, Sophia. I'd like to survive long enough to be misunderstood properly. I should have gone. Instead, I saw the watercolor map on the floor where Leonardo had dropped it earlier in the struggle. Open now to the lower chapel plan. My father's notes in the margin. One symbol circled twice in red. Oil stores. Lamp reserve beneath the old sacristy. If Leonardo was using the sealed crypt routes as his movement line, the reserve chamber sat directly beneath the main stair. One spark there and the whole lower passage would flood smoke upward, forcing everyone out of the tunnels and into open ground. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of thing Dante would forbid. I grabbed the map. Nico saw the look on my face and physically recoiled. No, that is the expression people make before I need bandages. The lamp reserve, I said. My father marked it. That sentence contains far too much family trauma. Dante blocked Leonardo's second shot and drove him back against the bell frame. Their guns skidded across stone. Knife now, hand to hand. Brutal and close. Leonardo moved like age was a rumor. I looked at Dante once. He did not look at me. That was permission or trust or necessity. I took all three. The ladder rattled under my weight as I dropped into the side shaft with the map clenched in my teeth. Nico followed, muttering prayers to saints, nutrition science, and Maria's meatballs in no particular order. The shaft opened behind the old choir screen onto a narrow service passage lined with dusty votives and locked cabinets. The reserve chamber door was oak-banded in black iron. Locked, of course. My father had once taught me that old doors always confessed if you listened at the hinge side. I pressed my ear to the wood. Thick. Swollen. Ancient pinlock. I had no proper tools, only a hairpin and the bone folder still tucked in my sleeve. Nico kept watch at the corridor mouth. Gun up. Take your time, he whispered. I say that sarcastically because I'm panicking. I noticed. My hands shook once. I stopped them. Then I worked. There was a particular sound old mechanisms made right before surrender. A tiny, softened click, like pride giving way. I heard it. Turned the latch. Inside, stone shelves held prayer oil, lamp fuel, cleaning spirits, years of careless storage in a room no inspector had seen since King's. One bullet in here in the chapel would become memory. Can we leave? Nico asked. I'm suddenly respectful of fire. I grabbed 2 canisters of oil and shoved one at him. Up the side stairs. His face went blank. You want me to help you commit tactical arson in a church? I want smoke in the tunnels. I need you to know this is not what my dietitian meant by cleansing. We moved fast. I poured a line through the service passage and under the first crypt arch. Nico, still muttering, did the same on the far side. Above us, gunfire boomed through stone. Shouts, running feet. Tommaso again, louder now, closer. Then the priest himself appeared at the corridor bend. He froze at the sight of us, and the oil shining black on the floor. Sophia, he said, don't. Interesting choice of phrase. His eyes went to the map in my hand. To the fuel. To Nico's gun. He looked suddenly less like a priest than a man who had mistaken management for morality and found out too late what it cost. If you light this, he said, the chapel records burn, the family archives. Your father's proof, everything. Dante's inheritance, his mother's chapel. The last physical shape of the world that made him. Nico glanced at me. No jokes now, just waiting. Footsteps hammered the tunnel behind Tommaso, Leonardo's men. There are moments when your old life dies quietly, without ceremony. Not in kisses or gunfire. In a decision no one can make with clean hands. I struck the votive taper against the stone wall. Tommaso moved. So did Nico. The shot was deafening in the tunnel. Tommaso staggered, eyes wide, not with accusation but relief, as if someone had finally answered a prayer he was too ashamed to finish. He fell against the arch as the flame touched oil. Fire ran. Not exploded. Ran. Fast, hungry, beautiful in the terrible way destruction always is when it knows exactly what to take. Smoke surged through the crypt passage. Men shouted, coughed. Broke formation. Nico grabbed my arm and hauled me up the side stair as heat hit our backs like a hand. I'm in love with Maria, he announced as we ran, in case I die nobly or from smoke. You picked now? I process under pressure. We burst into the nave as black smoke rolled from the lower vents. Salvatore men forced Leonardo's crew back into the open. The old chapel filled with bells, shouting, flame reflection, saints staring down through soot. Dante and Leonardo came through the bell stair door together like the last argument in the room. Leonardo saw the smoke and understood instantly. For the first time, he looked at me with respect. Then he smiled at Dante. There. That's the man I meant to make. Dante looked at the flames rising through the floor grates. At the records burning beneath our feet. At me. And chose. He walked straight through falling ash, took Leonardo's gun hand at the wrist, and broke it. Clean. Efficient. No sound from him. None. Then, when Leonardo reached for the knife at his ankle, Dante caught his throat in one scarred hand and drove the blade under his ribs with the other. Not wild, not vengeful. Necessary. Leonardo's eyes found mine over Dante's shoulder as the strength went out of him. Not hatred. Recognition. A man seeing at the end what he had failed to understand at the beginning. Dante let him fall. For one shattering second, the whole chapel held still around us. Then the roof timbers groaned. Out! Bianca's voice tore across the nave from the side door, pale and furious and alive with one arm strapped tight against her chest. We ran. Outside, rain finally broke over the city, hissing against the burning chapel roof. Men dragged the wounded clear. Maria found Nico and slapped him for the soot before kissing his forehead so quickly he looked concussed all over again. Dante stood in the downpour watching the fire eat his past. I went to him slowly. He did not turn. The records, I said. They were paper. His voice was almost lost under the rain. You were not. I took his hand anyway. Behind us, the chapel roof caved inward with a sound like history giving up. It was over. After war, the world did not become gentle. It became quieter in specific places. Phones rang less at night. The villa gates opened without 3 men checking the road first. Bianca recovered in a chair by the library window with her arm in a sling and enough bitterness to fuel a small republic. Nico, now publicly devoted to Maria and privately terrified of the words, invented excuses to visit the kitchen every 20 minutes and emerged each time with either biscotti or emotional damage. She called me impossible, he reported one morning, carrying cannoli and heartbreak in equal measure. Maria, 3 steps behind him with a wooden spoon, said, "You are." He looked at me. "Do you hear this abuse?" "Constantly," I said. Bianca snorted into her espresso. "Marry him, Maria, for the silence." Maria swatted all of us and smiled while doing it. The city papers called the chapel fire an electrical failure worsened by illegal archive storage. The dead were buried. The surviving Salvatore captains bent the knee to Dante not because he had won, but because they had seen what it cost him to do it. He was not the same man who crossed the museum gallery in a black suit and made a room forget itself. He was rougher at the edges now. More human in the pauses. Sometimes I woke in the night and found him standing at the balcony doors, looking out over the lake with his hand at the scar on his throat, as though measuring whether breath still belonged to him. He never spoke about those moments. Neither did I. Love, when it came to us, came in acts of witness before language. 3 weeks after the fire, I restored the chapel swallow fully. I set it on Dante's desk while he was in a meeting and left before he came upstairs. When I passed the cracked door later, I saw him alone in the office, with the bird in his hand and his head bent the way men bow only to ghosts or truths. He did not know I saw. Almost. My place in the house changed in ways nobody named. Maria began asking my opinion about curtains and feast days. Bianca started leaving security briefings on my work table with yellow tabs marking what affected me directly, which was as close to tenderness as she came. Nico asked if I thought dark green cashmere made him look emotionally available but still dangerous, which was not tenderness at all but did imply trust. The most difficult change was Dante. He no longer kept distance, as if it were the only honorable thing left to him. He still stopped himself, still chose restraint before hunger every time. But now when he passed me in the corridor, his fingers might brush the inside of my wrist. At dinner, his knee might find mine under the table and stay there exactly 1 beat too long. In the library, he once reached past me for a file and rested his hand at my waist for the smallest moment, enough to make my entire body go still around the place it had been. Almost had become its own language. The proposal arrived disguised as paperwork. Of course it did. I came into the morning room one rainy afternoon and found a brass key on the long walnut table beside a slim black folder. Dante stood at the window in shirt sleeves, rain shadowing the lake beyond him. No guards, no audience, just the sound of water and the soft tick of the clock Maria hated. "What is this?" I asked. "The Bellini workshop on Via San Luca," he said without turning. "Castiello used shell companies to keep it boarded after your father died. I bought it back." I stared at the key. My father's workshop. The place of linseed oil and dust and small hymns hummed under his breath. The place I had not been allowed to mourn properly because grief had been interrupted by guns and men and survival. I touched the folder. Inside were deeds, insurance transfers, a trust charter establishing a restoration grant in my father's name for damaged church works and public art across Lombardy. My vision blurred. You did this? Yes. Why? He turned then. Because it was Dante, there was no rehearsed speech, no kneeling theater. Only a man in a rain-dark room, looking at me as if the truth had become more dangerous than bullets. Because I don't know how to give you a safer world, he said, but I can return what was stolen from yours. My throat hurt. That was when I noticed the ring box, small, plain, black, set beside the key like he did not assume either belonged to him until I said so. He came closer, slowly enough to stop if I wanted. I didn't. When you left the plane and walked back to me, he said, you chose with open eyes. I won't call that debt. I won't call it fate. I will ask only once. His hand opened. Not ring first, palm first. If you stay, he said, voice low and steady and carrying every unsaid thing with it. Stay because you want the life that comes after my name, not just the danger inside it. I put my hand in his. That alone shook him. I felt it. I don't know how to want things cleanly anymore, I admitted, but I know where I walk when it matters. His thumb moved once over my knuckles, almost undid me. Restorer, he said, and the word held no possession now, only wonder, worn soft by use. Is that yes? I nodded because speech had gone thin. When he slid the ring on my finger, it was not a fairy tale diamond. It was his mother's chapel ring, reset with a small bell worked into the gold band on the inside where only I would know it was there. I started crying then. Quietly. Embarrassingly. For my father. For Bianca's blood on the road. For the chapel in ashes. For the fact that love had reached me through all of it and still looked me in the face. Dante touched the tears under my eyes as if they required a license. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For how you had to meet me. I laughed through it. That was never the strangest part. He leaned down, rested his forehead to mine, and stayed there. No urgency. No audience. Just warmth earned slowly enough to trust. From the hallway came Nico's voice. Maria, if there is a proposal happening without snacks, this family has learned nothing. Maria hissed. Shut up and carry the tray. I laughed against Dante's mouth before he kissed me. This time he did not stop because he had to. He stopped because we were smiling. At dusk, he left the key on the table beside my hand and went to take a call from the docks. I sat there alone for a minute, listening to the rain and the ordinary clock and the distant argument between Nico and Maria about whether celebratory sfogliatelle counted as an emotional event. It sounded almost like home. 9 months later, the workshop on Via San Luca smelled like varnish, coffee, and fresh plaster instead of dust and abandonment. We had kept the front windows old and the back room bright. My father's long table stood under new lamps. The cracked saint from the museum watched over the sink from a repaired niche. Apprentices came 3 afternoons a week under the Bellini grant, their hands clumsy and reverent and hungry to learn how patience could become a profession. Ordinary life did not make Dante less dangerous. It made the danger specific. He still left before dawn some mornings with Bianca and 2 black cars, returning with cold air in his coat and silence in his jaw. Men still lowered their eyes when he entered certain rooms. The city still took its order from people who understood violence in at least 2 languages. But now he came home. That was the radical thing. Nico and Maria never did settle into anything as simple as courtship. They moved through the villa like whether her feeding him pretending resistance, both of them ferocious whenever anyone else commented. 2 weeks before Christmas, I caught him kissing flour from her wrist beside the pantry while arguing that lasagna had derailed his tactical conditioning. She swatted him with a dish towel and then fed him from the spoon she was holding. Bianca recovered under sharper edges and, to my private satisfaction, took to correcting Dante in meetings when he pretended sleep was optional. She also began dropping by the workshop with files she claimed needed climate-stable storage and stories she definitely did not mean to tell me about the worst parts of her 20s. She had warned me first, then accepted me. I knew what a gift that was. On the first warm night of spring, the villa filled with the sound of cutlery and low laughter and the open windows breathing lemon trees into the dining room. We had 10 people at the table and 3 pistols between them, which counted as peace in our world. Dante sat at the head, because everyone expected it and hated it only slightly less than he did. His jacket was off, his tie gone, the scar at his throat visible above the open collar of his shirt, pale against skin darkened by the lake sun. I noticed because I was trying not to. Some habits become devotion before you admit they survived. Halfway through dinner, Nico launched into a dramatic account of a customs official who had offended him by implying cured meats were not a necessary security expense. Maria called him an idiot with enough affection to make Bianca quietly leave the room for 10 seconds and return with fresh wine, rather than be seen smiling. "You see," Nico said, catching my eye, "marriage has made this house sentimental." Dante glanced at me over the rim of his glass. "Has it?" There were still moments when the room fell away and left only that. Almost even now, maybe especially now. Later, after everyone left and the dishes had been bullied out of our hands by Maria, I found Dante in the workshop with the lights low, standing over a damaged processional cross I had spent all week stabilizing. He had removed his cufflinks and set them neatly beside the jar of gesso like a man trying very hard not to touch anything that belonged to me unless invited. "You're studying it like it insulted you," I said. He turned. The look in his eyes was softer these days. That did not make it lighter. "I was waiting," he said. "For what?" "You." Simple. Economical. The kind of answer that landed harder because he spent words carefully. I crossed the room. The boards creaked under my bare feet. Outside, a tram bell sounded at the corner, absurdly ordinary. My ring caught the lamplight when I lifted my hand to his throat. Same place. Same pulse. Different world. My fingertips settled beneath the scar where bandage and blood and fear had once met me first. His breathing changed immediately. Not stopped this time. Deepened. I felt it happen. Dante closed his eyes. "There it is," he said quietly. "What?" "The thing you do." I smiled a little. "Touch your throat?" "No." His eyes opened. Dark. Unhidden. "You touch me there like I'm worth calming." The words went through me slowly enough to hurt. Chapter 6 had given him the admission inside himself. This was the full naming. "At last. You were bleeding the first time," I said. "I was dying the first time." I swallowed. "And the second?" His hand came up over mine, covering my fingers at his pulse the way he had in the museum, in the cellar, in every life after. "The second," he said, "I'm only yours." He had used the phrase only once before, in the dark after our engagement, low and wrecked and almost angry with the need of it. Now it sounded nothing like possession. It sounded like peace he did not fully trust and kept choosing anyway. Emotion rose fast and confused in me, as it always did with him. Love, fear, grief, gratitude, the old disturbance of feeling safe with a man whose hands knew too much about ending things. I pressed lightly at his throat and whispered, "Don't speak." He stopped. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Not the rare, almost smile he gave Nico's idiocy or Maria's insults. A real one, small, devastating, entirely earned. I kissed him first, only in the way that still fit who I was, by rising onto my toes and letting the space close slowly enough that he could stop it if he wanted. He didn't. His hand settled at my waist, warm and sure and careful still, as if love had not erased restraint, but taught it a gentler purpose. When we drew apart, the workshop hummed with evening, the refrigerator in the back room, a scooter outside, the faint perfume of varnish and coffee and home. I thought of the chapel burning, of Bianca in the road, of my father hiding truth in paper, of Tommaso choosing cowardice and calling it mercy, of Leonardo believing love only weakened men like Dante. He had been wrong. Love had not made Dante softer where it mattered. It had made him choose what to keep. There would always be a shadow at the edge of our life. Nights when he came home too quiet. Mornings when I found dried lake rain on his coat and did not ask what the city had demanded to stay ordered. The moral wound of loving a man who kept some forms of peace with his own hands did not close simply because he came back to me after. Maybe that was the unresolved thing. Not whether I loved him. I did. Not whether he loved me. I knew. It was whether love could ever make the cost of such a life simple. It couldn't. But it could make it chosen. He touched the bell hidden inside my ringband with his thumb, then lowered his forehead to mine. Restorer, he murmured. Warm now. Home now. Everything the first use had not been. Yes? Stay, I laughed softly. I already did. Outside, a tram passed. Inside, his pulse beat steady beneath my fingers. That was the whole story, in the end.